I'm the Avatar, and I'm gonna save the world with my friends.
Hey, welcome back, ScreenCrush. I'm Ryan Airy, and this is all of the Easter eggs, references, and little things you might have missed in the first trailer for the live-action Avatar series. The entire ScreenCrush team are huge fans of the original series, and we had a blast breaking down every tiny small detail of this trailer for you. And don't worry, if you are new to Avatar, then we're going to explain this world and why this show is so great, and we'll be mostly spoiler-free. So, leading up to this trailer, Netflix ran this really cool countdown video that showed a first-person point of view of Sokka fishing, just like when they first discovered Aang in the series. And later we see them counting down using carvings of each element. Now this was such a brilliant choice because this was inviting viewers to be a part of the world of Avatar. So for the first time, we can see these events in live action.
Hey, I thought there was already a live action Avatar movie.
We are seeing these events in live action for the first time. Actually, look, let's be honest. The movie was a huge disappointment for many reasons. In fact, let me know what you thought of the movie down in the comments below. And we're going to save our thoughts and expectations for the show until the end of the video.
Or what even is an Avatar anyways? Like the blue guys or something?
No, okay, so very brief recap of what Avatar is, just in case you're coming into this fresh or you want a refresher. For you hardcore fans, don't worry, I will be brief. So Avatar takes place in a world that is a mix of several different Asian cultures. In this world, there are 4 kingdoms representing the 4 elements: water, earth, fire, and air. Certain people can control these elements, and they are called benders. Also, there is always one person who is able to control all 4 elements, and this person is called the Avatar. The Avatar also possesses the spirits of all the Avatars that have come before them. Now normally, these kingdoms all live in balance, but a few years ago, the Fire Nation got power hungry and attacked the other kingdoms. Now around this time, the Avatar went missing, and the series starts with the discovery of a new Avatar, a kid named Aang, who is frozen in ice. So the show is about Aang and his friends Katara and Sokka taking him around the world so he can master these other elements and defeat the Fire Nation. Now all of that isn't really a spoiler, it's covered in the opening monologue of every episode. Now, in the animated and live action show, the different kingdoms are inspired by different Asian cultures. The air nomads are inspired by the Tibetan elements. In fact, the concept of the Avatar, a being who is reincarnated through the centuries, is partially inspired by the belief that the Dalai Lama is a reincarnated spirit who leads his people. The water tribes are based on Inuit and Yupik cultures. The Fire Nation are inspired by a mix of feudal Japan and Southeast Asia, with a bit of Mesoamerican culture in there too, as we'll talk about later. And the Earth Kingdom is inspired by Chinese culture. Now, not everybody born in these kingdoms is born a bender.
Air, water, earth, fire, fan and sword.
It's kind of like being born a Force-sensitive person that gives you the potential to become a Jedi Knight. So that's the background, and now let's break down this trailer. We start off seeing ships of the Fire Nation. This is specifically Zuko's ship attacking the Northern Water Tribe at the end of Season 1. And here we see them riding the air bison Appa over this devastation. This is the episode in Season 1 where we see some villagers being kidnapped by a spirit, Heibai, for ruining his home. Next we see what we believe is a flashback. Now this is the attack on the Southern Air Temple when the Fire Nation was wiping out all the airbenders. Now we never actually see this attack in the show, at least not in any real detail. You see, throughout the series, Aang is looking for his people. That's why he is called the Last Airbender. Now, leading the attack, we see Sozin. This was the Fire Lord who was the great-grandfather of Zuko, a very crucial character in this show. Notice how his firebending stance actually looks like the dragon dance that we saw in Season 3. Now, dragons are extremely important in the culture of the Fire Kingdom. It's even said the dragons were the original firebenders. We see this influence in their armor. Notice the scales and how this dragon engraving on the shoulder leads up into the 3-dimensional dragon figure mounted on a pauldron. And here we see him attacking an airbender, and notice we kind of see the fire being redirected, but just barely. This is most likely Monk Giasto, Aang's mentor and friend. He is a leader within the air nomads and would be most likely the person to hold his own against Sozin. And outside the temple, of course, we see all these bald monks in airbending robes fighting against the Fire Nation forces. Now, the firebending is also based on Northern Shaolin Kung Fu. It's very forceful and very offensive, while waterbending is based more on Tai Chi, which is more about redirecting energy. Airbending is based on the Chinese martial arts style Bagua Zhang, while earthbending is based on Hung Ga, which is a strong stance that is rooted to the ground, perfect for earthbending. So then we see Aang's origin story, perfectly recreated from the original series. Katara and Sokka were fishing when they discovered Aang frozen in an iceberg. Now Aang is actually like 100 years old, but he is still just a kid. And that is really the appeal of this show. Like this kid, this child is the one person who can defeat the Fire Nation and bring balance to the world, but he really just wants to have fun and get to be a kid. Now, when he first exits the iceberg, he's in what's called the avatar state. This is basically when Aang goes into a trance and suddenly can use all the different elements without any training. And I love that they juxtapose this really big, scary avatar state with moments like this.
Will you go penguin sledding with me?
And then we see the Fire Nation capital and Fire Lord Ozai. Now this is actually a big change here for the series, where we were actually seeing Ozai's face in Season 1. Like in the animated series, they avoided showing him to build up that he is this big, untouchable force. And by the way, in the series, he's actually voiced by Mark Hamill.
You will obey me, or this defiant breath will be your last.
When Katara says,
"The Fire Nation has destroyed everything in their path,"
this is a reference to the iconic opening narration of the cartoon.
Then, everything changed when the Fire Nation attacked.
As the Netflix logo pops up, we hear the iconic chanting song. Now this is the ending song of each episode, a foil to Aang's more peaceful airbending style. The music appears diegetically in the Season 3 episode, The Firebending Masters. It also appears in a lot of the Agni Kai battles. Here we see a shot of the Fire Nation princess and Zuko's sister Azula. You can tell by the hairpiece she's wearing, symbolizing the status of the Fire Nation royal family.
But this is a royal artifact. It's supposed to be worn by the Crown Prince.
I want you to have it.
Now, we only see her twice in Season 1, once in a flashback and at the finale. Interestingly, she's using a bow and arrow here. Usually, she just uses her impressive firebending, not any real weapons. Next, we see the trio at the Northern Air Temple. Aang, Katara, and Sokka are talking to Teo, and then this explosion behind them starts off as green. Now, this could be a chemical explosion from Teo's father, who is an inventor. Sokka and the inventor causing an explosion is involved in the climax of that particular episode. Here we see Zuko firebend against some attackers. Now, based on Iroh's cuffs, which we see later, this is probably the episode where Iroh is captured by Earthbenders after relaxing. Now this is a poignant moment for Zuko, who is our antagonist, where we see that there's something more important to him than just finding the Avatar. He wants to save his uncle Iroh.
Wait, who's Zuko?
So Zuko is one of the most important characters in the series. He is the Prince of the Fire Nation, a firebender who has sworn to hunt down and capture the Avatar. However, he is often overshadowed by his younger sister Azula. She is a much more gifted firebender and far more ruthless than he is. Now Zuko is always trying to impress his father and to prove that he deserves to be the heir to this kingdom. Also important to note, his hair is actually symbolic of his shame to his father, Fire Lord Ozai. The producers and showrunners actually said that the sound and VFX design is going to be specifically different for Zuko, Azula's, Ozai, and Iroh's firebending abilities to distinguish between their different styles.
Iroh's looks slightly different than Zuko's, which looks slightly different than Ozai's, which looks different than Azula's.
And here we see the devastation of the Southern Temple that we saw a flashback of earlier. Now this touches on one of the most heartbreaking things about this series. Aang continuously travels to abandoned air temples, places sometimes where he grew up, and he only finds extinction and devastation. And most importantly though, this is where Momo joins the party.
What are you gonna name him? Momo.
Both Momo and Appa are voiced by the legendary D. Bradley Baker. You know, this guy.
Shall we do what we do?
Let's blow something up!
And then we cut to more devastation, this overhead shot of the Northern Water Tribe. Now, I think this is from the Siege of the North at the end of Season 1. The Water Tribe knew the fire ships were approaching because their smokestacks made black ash fall from the sky like snow, which we can see on the ice here. So, Katara and Sokka are Aang's best friends, and they help guide him around this world after he's been gone for 100 years. Sokka is a capable fighter, and later in the trailer we see him using his iconic boomerang. And Sokka is also the comic relief of the series. He's also a hopeless romantic, and depending on the episode, either your favorite or least favorite character in the show. Whereas Katara is the eternal optimist, and also Aang has a pretty big crush on her. Now notice how faithfully they reproduce their clothing from the animated series. The necklace that Katara wears was her grandmother's engagement necklace that is very important later in the season, no spoilers. And even notice how her sash depicts waves of water, and her buttons look like sand dollars or shells. And her hair loops are a reference to the traditional Nunavut Inuit hairstylings. Also, I think they took particular care to show her saying this.
Aang.
Because in the movie, she pronounced it like this. And then we see them fly over Kyoshi Island, where Sokka learned that sexism was bad.
Good job, son.
Later, we see several action shots from this sequence, which, by the way, we have some notes on. Now notice this statue on the shore. That is the statue of a former Avatar Kyoshi, the namesake of this island. So the seriousness of Aang's mission is undercut by Aang riding this ball of air into a statue of a cat owl. Now cat owls do appear throughout this series, and by the way, do yourselves a favor, Google cat owl right now, because it's the most adorable animal mashup of all time. And by the way, this shot is actually producing a famous scene from the opening of the show. In another startling departure from the movie, Sokka is actually sarcastic and funny.
Right. There goes the savior of the world.
sorry. I'm sorry. Hey, I'm sorry. Hey.
Sokka's actor Ian Owsley said that he actually incorporated a lot of his own jokes for Sokka's character, and this is actually really in line with Sokka's personality as well, because in the Season 3 episode, The Ember Island Players, Sokka gives notes and joke suggestions to the actor who is portraying him.
Actually, I think I can help you.
Incorporating the comedy to translate to live action was important to the cast and showrunners. And notice here that Sokka is eating. He ate. In the show, he's always snacking, and here he is eating dango, Japanese dumplings on a stick. Now this is likely from the welcome feast on Kyoshi Island, where the villagers are so happy to see the Avatar that they shower them with treats.
Did you say treats?
No, not right now. And then the strings of the opening theme begin to enter the score. And guys, this gave us a bad case of the feels.
I'm in a glass case of emotion!
And then we see this Fire Nation ship near the ice, and we think this is from early in the season when Zuko first tries to capture Aang. And then, oh yes, we see one of the best characters in the series, Uncle Iroh. Now Iroh is Zuko's uncle, so he is the older brother of the Fire Lord, and unlike his brother, he is not a cruel man. He's kind, he's understanding, and he tries to guide Zuko on the right path. Uncle Iroh is played by Paul Sun-Hyung Lee, who starred on the show Kim's Convenience, but you probably know him as Carson Teva from The Mandalorian. The portrait next to Iroh is likely his brother, the Fire Lord Ozai, which would likely mean that these are Zuko's quarters. Iroh is not a big fan of his brothers because the Fire Lord is an a-hole who also stole his birthright. And then we see a shot of Zuko hanging up a portrait of Aang, and this shot is loaded with Easter eggs. This is a map of Kyoshi Island, and these are the Fire Nation islands, including Ember Island and Crescent Island. And this is the Northern Water Tribe island that we see throughout the trailer. And this is also the same map that is pulled out of the snow during the live stream. Very cool detail. We also see Avatar Yang Chen's portrait here. Now this was the last airbending avatar before Aang, which is why she has the Master Airbender tattoo on her head. We also see this plateau on the right that could be Crescent Island. Now there used to be a Fire Nation temple here. Now Aang visits this temple in Season 1, but it is destroyed after his visit, which is why it's not in the drawing. But Zuko would know that Aang was at this temple because he was also there. The text on the bottom left is in Mandarin, which mentions suspicious activity, because Zuko is following Aang throughout the world, and the Fire Nation puts out a bounty on Aang, so it would make sense if they would have received messages about suspicious activity, perhaps stirred up by the new Avatar. And notice how this map has drawings and circles and lines tracing Aang's path throughout the world. This is from a scene in the series when Iroh and Zuko are following Aang and call him a master of evasive maneuvering, when really, he's just a kid who's sightseeing.
He is clearly a master of evasive maneuvering.
You have no idea where you're going, do you?
And then we see Fire Nation armor recreated loyally from the show. Now notice how the helmets are like samurai warriors and the mouthpiece looks like the metal grate from a furnace. And in this shot we see these red tassels on spears. Now these were actually used to blind enemies and soak up the blood to prevent the spear from getting too slippy.
Man, dude, that's dark. So why does Zuko want to hunt down the Avatar?
Because he needs to regain his honor so that he can return to the Fire Nation. You see, Zuko's been banished by his father and then sent out to capture the Avatar. Again, his whole thing is trying to prove himself to his dad. Now notice behind him here that the walls are made to look like dragon scales, just like how his cabin has dragon decor in the show. Oh, and when Zuko rescues his uncle, notice the Earthbenders are riding ostrich horses, another fun animal hybrid we see in this show. For instance, this creature is called a Sheer Shu, and it's being ridden by June, a bounty hunter that Zuko and Iroh hunt down to track down the Avatar.
I'd love to help you out, but I'm a little short on money.
The Sheer Shu searches by scent, which is why it has the nose of a mole. Another cool difference between this show and the movie is that the earthbending actually happens when people move their hands, as opposed to this. And then we see Fire Lord Ozai in the Fire Nation, and this is probably when he and his son had the Agni Kai fire duel. Fun fact, this is likely named after the Hindu god of fire, Agni, which is spelled like Agni. This is the duel where Zuko's father gives him his scar, and notice that we actually see him deflecting the fire, whereas in the show, he never fights back. Now we do often see him use his abilities to deflect in the show, which is foreshadowing his eventual character arc that I won't spoil here. So in this shot, we see Aang using his airbending skills to hang glide, like we frequently does in the original show. And here we see him using his airbending to create a fog that conceals him and his friends. Now here we see the monstrous form of the panda spirit Heibai.
Hey, that's not a panda bear.
No, well, he actually turns from his docile panda form into this monster because of the devastation to his forest caused by the Fire Nation that we mentioned earlier. It's actually Aang who helps return him to his peaceful self. And then we see more shots of Kyoshi Island. Now, in the original series, the people on this island revere the Avatar Kyoshi, a warrior woman. So this island is filled with proud proud female warriors who, like I mentioned earlier, teach Sokka to not be sexist.
Wait a second, there's no way a bunch of girls took us down.
A bunch of girls, huh?
But in this scene, we see Sokka wearing the female warrior's armor, but not the dress and makeup. Now in the show, the makeup had important symbolism. Sokka saw the makeup as girly, but then they explained its true meaning.
Bravery and honor.
It's such a cool moment from the show that I really hope they don't overlook in the series. But one big change here is that the firebender Zhao tracks them down to Kyoshi Island, whereas in the original show it was Zuko. Now in the animated series, Zhao was a great villain voiced by Jason Isaacs. He's a power-hungry general who basically sees Zuko as a rival. Now here we see what is clearly the city of Omashu. You can see the slopes and slides that are used for mail and transport service with earthbending. But we can see Aang and Teo gliding into the city. This might be a slight diversion from the show where they meet Teo in a different city. Now either Teo brings the trio directly to Omashu, or perhaps they've combined Omashu and the Northern Air Temple. Next we see Aang in a tunnel, happy to see sick Katara and Sokka. This is most probably from the Season 1 episode The Blue Spirit, where the siblings are sick and Aang tries to find them a cure. Aang then gets captured by Zhao and is saved by the Blue Spirit. Next we see Sokka riding Appa with Aang hanging on from his horn over a firebender. Now this is from the episode Imprisoned, where we meet the earthbender Haru. You can see the big pipes where captured earthbenders use the coal to escape the Fire Nation prison ship. And here we see Aang's old friend King Bumi, played by Utkarsh Ambudkar. Now this is one of the first times in Season 1 where we see the extent of how powerful earthbending can be. Next we see Katara fighting Zuko in the Northern Water Kingdom from the finale of Season 1. Katara tries to protect Aang as he tries to channel his avatar state. Now in this scene we meet one of the coolest characters in the show, Jet. We see him defending Katara from firebenders. In the original series, Jet is the leader of a group of freedom fighters, a group of kids who were left displaced and traumatized by the Fire Nation. Jet's swords are also inspired by the ancient twin Chinese hook swords, Shuang-Gao. Zuko fights Aang with his firebending in what looks to be the first episode of the show, when Zuko's Fire Nation group attacks the Southern Water Tribe. And then we get to see Aang going into the Avatar state, which I explained earlier. Now notice though that as his tattoo lights up, you can see the intricacies of the design, the swirls and various characters. They also look a lot like the spirit of Rava, the spirit who inhabits all avatars that we saw in the sequel series, The Legend of Korra. Now this is actually similar to the way it lit up in the M. Night Shyamalan film, The Last Airbender. Now this shot of him going into the Avatar state is probably from the Southern Air Temple after he finds out that all of the air nomads are dead. And of course, the title font is the same font and characters as the original show. We have brushstrokes, but now with the texture of burlap, like a ship's sail or the material from Aang's glider. So guys, what did you think about the trailer? Do you think this show is going to be better than the movie? Let us know in the comments below. And I gotta give a big shout out to the whole ScreenCrush staff who co-wrote this video with me and who know way more about Avatar than I do. We have Srinidhi Rao, Harriet Lengel-Enright, Randolf Nombrado, and Ashley Lavalle. And guys, if it's your first time here, please subscribe and smash that bell for alerts. For ScreenCrush, I'm Ryan Airy.